Mike Huckabee's presidential campaign is facing the possibility of sinking. Now, why? Well, it's not because he's saying crazy things like, I don't know, eating dogs. How Bernie Sanders, or he wouldn't trust Bernie Sanders with his Labrador, despite the fact that his son killed dogs back at like summer camp. No, it's not that. How about supporting slavery for poor people? Well, it's not sinking because of that. Or how about being super uncomfortably close to Kim Davis, Mike Huckabee, right? It's also not because he's polling at 3% nationally. No. It's because he's running out of the one resource that is necessary in surviving the GOP primary. Money. According to fundraising reports recently released, Huckabee raised just $1.24 million. Now, that's actually the lowest of any candidate who's made the top tier debate this year, and about as half as much as his opponent, Rand Paul. Wow. All right. Now, Ford O'Connell is a GOP strategist, right? And I believe he spoke to Politico about this, who worked with Senator John McCain's presidential campaign in 2008, said of this, quote, "Candidates posting poor figures should be extremely worried. Donors want to back the winner, and it's becoming completely clear who the winners are likely to be." Now, this guy obviously knows especially who the losers are, since he did back John McCain. But nonetheless, even he can see what's going on here. And what we see going on is Mike Huckabee continuing to lose fundraising support. It's drying up. And when you run out of money, you're out of the race. It's exactly what happened to Scott Walker, and it's exactly what happened to Rick Perry. They ran out of money. They had to drop. Their fundraising dried up. Now, of the winners, actually, in the money race, on the Republican side, you've got Donald Trump, who's almost completely self-funded because he's a billionaire. He's worth $10 billion. He's huge, right? Ben Carson, who's in second, former Governor Jeb Bush, and Marco Rubio, and Ted Cruz. So those five have been raising a lot of money, and they're on the top of the money race on the GOP side. As far as Mike Huckabee, according to the latest fundraising figures, Huckabee spent about $100,000 more than he brought in, now leaving him with about $700,000 on hand. Now, that's decent, but when it comes to running a national campaign, setting up infrastructure, that's not going to cut it. It's not going to cut it. And you know what's funny? He's got less money than Senator Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham, who's polling at about 1%. Back to O'Connell, he says, quote, "It's horrible for Huckabee. If he doesn't win Iowa, he's dead in the water." Now, some other people here, Rand Paul, for example, and Chris Christie, are actually in much better shape than Huckabee. However, when it comes to the money race, they're still really far behind the top five. And let's see. For example, Paul raised about $2.5 million, but he spent about $4.5 million, but he still has about $2 million still. So he's actually doing quite well. Lindsey Graham, surprisingly, has actually the most money in the bank. Lindsey Graham, he's got money in the bank. But of course, most of it came from his Senate account. So he's not actually raising a ton of money because he's Lindsey Graham and nobody cares about Lindsey Graham. Anyway, now back to Huckabee. Now, I mentioned earlier that he spent about $100,000 more than he brought in. And they've got a term for that. It's called burn rate. Now, his burn rate is at negative 200%. He spent $2 million last quarter while raising only about $1 million. Ooh, that's not good. That's not good at all. If you're spending twice as much as you were coming in and you're still at third in the polls, you are doing something wrong. Majorly wrong. So here you have Mike Huckabee doing abysmal in his polling and on fundraising, spending twice what he brings in. Now, in my opinion, Mike Huckabee I don't think Mike Huckabee's a serious candidate. I don't think so at all. Because he's appealing to the 30% of the GOP voters who are religious fundamentalists. You cannot win based on that little group alone. You actually have to go out and court more voters, not just the religious fundamentalists. He's not a serious candidate. Remember, these are the people that hear him say, yeah, let's sell poor people into slavery to help pay off their debts, or let's ignore the rule of law because we hate the gays. Those are the people that he's trying to court. And even then, he's not doing very well amongst them. There's so many people in the GOP field that are trying to use the religious angle that even he's losing out on it. It's crazy. Most people, and I'll include a lot of people in the GOP, are like, yeah, you know what? I don't want to be ruled by the Christian version of Sharia law. I don't. I don't want to be in the Christian version of the Taliban. No. So, it's not going to work. Now, he's saying outrageous things, right? And you've seen it. He's been getting more and more outrageous as time goes by, and I think that's part of the Trump effect. And in the end, of course, it's not working, because only Trump can be Trump. You cannot out-Trump Trump. And the problem with that, too, is that, well, as he says more crazy things, and he gets even more religious in his rantings and ravings, well, you're going to turn people off in the general. You're going to be unelectable in the general. And he's got to know that. Mike Huckabee can't be that stupid. He can't be that dumb. You know you can't win with that very, very small minority of very, very religious people. You can't. You have to build coalitions. You have to go back to the center in order to at least appeal to some independent voters. Mike Huckabee is not even trying. He's not even trying. Crazy can only get you so far. So what's the payoff here? Well, the payoff, I think, is speaking fees and engagements. He gets his name out there, stays relevant. Then he can get $200,000, $300,000 a speech. That's what it's all about. And books. Now, I could be wrong, right? Maybe I'm wrong. And maybe Mike Huckabee in his deranged mind thinks he can actually win a general election. I don't know. It's also just as likely of having Mike Huckabee win the election or win the general as this video getting 1 billion views and me becoming a millionaire. Sure, it could happen, but it's not very likely.